The envelope arrived on a Tuesday. County Recorder's Office, return address printed in that official block font that makes everything feel serious. I opened it at the kitchen table, my coffee going cold beside me. Inside was a property deed. My property deed, except it wasn't. Not anymore. The lake house had been transferred to Mike Patterson, my son-in-law, 6 months ago, according to the date stamped across the top, February 14th. I stared at that date. Valentine's Day. I'd been in the hospital that day. Hip replacement surgery. I couldn't have been anywhere near a notary public. I looked at the signature line. Barbara Henderson, written in careful cursive. Except those loops were wrong. The way the B curve didn't match how I'd signed my name for 68 years. Someone had tried to copy my signature. Someone had tried to make it look like mine. The keys to the lake house sat on the counter where I'd left them that morning, silver and brass, worn smooth from 40 years of use. The keychain still had the little wooden fish my husband had bought at that craft fair in 1987. I picked them up. Solid. Real. Mine. But according to this document, the house wasn't mine anymore. I set the keys down carefully, pulled out my reading glasses, read the deed again, slower this time. The legal description matched. Lot 47, Clearwater Shores, 43 miles north of the city. 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, dock access, the place where my husband proposed, where Sarah learned to swim, where my grandchildren spent every summer catching fireflies in mason jars. The notary stamp was from Patterson and Associates Real Estate, Mike's old office. Before he lost his license 2 years ago, he'd notarized his own fraud. I looked up at the photo on my refrigerator. Last summer, Mike and Lucas on the dock, both holding fishing poles, both grinning, Lucas's first base. Mike had been so patient with him, showing him how to cast, how to reel in slow. I'd watched from the porch swing, drinking iced tea, thinking how lucky Sarah was, how lucky we all were. My hand shook as I set the deed down. February 14th. I'd woken up in the hospital that morning, groggy from anesthesia. Sarah had been there. I remembered her holding my hand, telling me the surgery went well. Mike had stayed home with the kids, she'd said. Someone needed to be there when they got home from school. But Mike hadn't been home that day, not entirely. He'd been at a notary's office, forging my signature, stealing my house. I stood up, walked to the sink, ran cold water over my hands. The kitchen looked the same as it had 5 minutes ago. Same white cabinets, same checkered curtains, same life. Except nothing was the same. I'd given Mike money over the years. $35,000 for their down payment when Sarah first got married, $28,000 when his business failed, $15,000 for the kids' private school, $12,000 just last year for some investment that never materialized. I'd never asked for any of it back. They were family. And family doesn't steal your home while you're unconscious in a hospital bed. I dried my hands, picked up the phone. My daughter needed to know what her husband had done. I didn't call right away. I sat there with that deed in front of me, thinking about how I'd gotten here. Sarah was 42 now, my only child. She'd married Mike 8 years ago at the lake house, actually. Small ceremony on the dock, just family and close friends. He'd seemed so genuine that day. Steady job in real estate, good with the kids from Sarah's first marriage. When he asked if they could get married at the lake house, I'd been honored. That property meant something to our family. My husband and I had bought it 40 years ago with his first big bonus from the teaching hospital. We'd poured everything into that place. Mike had lost his real estate license 2 years ago. The market crash hit hard, but there was also some disciplinary issue. Something about a contract dispute he never fully explained. Sarah made excuses. She always made excuses for him. I wanted to believe him, wanted to think he was just going through a rough patch. Everyone hits hard times. Over 12 years, I'd given Mike and Sarah everything I could spare. $35,000 for their first house down payment when they got married. $28,000 when Mike lost his job and needed to start that consulting business, money I never saw again. $15,000 for the kids' private school tuition when Mike's real estate commissions dried up. $12,000 just last year for an investment opportunity that disappeared overnight. $90,000, my retirement savings, carefully built over 40 years of teaching. And I never hesitated, never asked for receipts or repayment plans. They were family. That was my mistake, being too trusting. My husband used to joke that I'd give away my last dollar if someone asked nicely enough. He wasn't wrong. Mike and Sarah had 2 kids. Emma was 10, sharp as a tack, always watching. Lucas was 7, still believed in magic. They loved the lake house. Every summer they'd spend 2 weeks there, swimming, fishing, catching fireflies. Last summer, Emma had asked me if the lake house would always be in our family. Always, I'd told her. This is your inheritance, you and Lucas. I looked at the deed again. Mike had taken that promise and turned it into a lie. The power of attorney. That's how he'd done it. 7 months ago, I'd gone in for hip replacement surgery. Routine procedure, but I'd be under anesthesia, recovering for weeks. Mike had suggested I sign a power of attorney. Just in case you need someone to handle bills while you recover, he'd said. Sarah was there, nodding along. It made sense. I was going to be out of commission. I'd signed it without reading carefully. The nurse brought it to my pre-op room, and I'd scrawled my signature while they were prepping my IV. Mike had seemed so concerned, so helpful. Don't worry about anything, he'd told me. I'll take care of everything. He had taken care of everything. He'd taken care of transferring my house into his name. That evening, I pulled out the power of attorney paperwork. There it was, my signature, shaky from the hospital medications. But the property deed signature looked nothing like it. Someone had traced it poorly, trying to match my hand, but failing. The loops were wrong. The pressure was wrong. I thought about calling Sarah right then, but it was almost 6. Emma and Lucas would be having dinner. I didn't want to drop this bomb while they were eating spaghetti or whatever Sarah had made. This wasn't a conversation for a Tuesday night with homework on the table and bedtime routines ahead. My neighbor Margaret had mentioned something odd a few months back. We were in her garden. Margaret had this beautiful rose garden, won awards at the county fair every year. We'd been friends for 15 years, ever since I'd moved to this neighborhood after my husband died. Every week we met for garden club on Thursdays. I saw Mike at your lake house last weekend, she'd said, pruning her yellow roses. Thought that was strange. Wasn't that when you were visiting your sister in Florida? I'd brushed it off. Oh, he probably went up to check on the place, make sure the pipes were okay. Margaret had given me a look. That look she gets when she thinks I'm being naive. He had a moving truck, Barb. Maybe he was moving some old furniture I'd asked him to take, I'd said. But I hadn't asked him to take anything, and Margaret had let it drop. She didn't want to interfere in family business. I didn't want to seem suspicious of my own son-in-law. Now I wished she'd pushed harder, wished I'd asked more questions. That night I sat at the kitchen table, the same table where Mike used to help Emma with homework, where we'd planned family Christmases, and I looked at the document again. The signature looked nothing like mine, but it had been notarized, stamped official, filed with the county. On paper, legally, the lake house belonged to Mike now. On paper, I'd signed away 40 years of memories. I made myself a cup of chamomile tea, stood at the window looking out at the darkening street. Margaret's porch light was on 3 houses down. My financial advisor, Tom, had mentioned once that I should review my estate planning, make sure everything was protected. I'd waved him off. Mike and Sarah are trustworthy, I'd told him. They'd never take advantage. Tom hadn't argued, but I'd seen the skepticism in his eyes. He took notes on those yellow legal pads he always carried, precise handwriting filling page after page. He'd probably tried to warn me in his own professional way. I just hadn't listened. Sarah called that night, like she did most evenings. "Mom, how are you?" Her voice sounded strained. Did she know? Was she protecting him? Or was Mike keeping this secret even from her? I almost told her everything right then. Almost said, "Your husband forged my signature and stole the lake house." But Emma was in the background asking about dessert, and Lucas was complaining about his math homework. Normal life. Normal Tuesday night. "Fine, honey," I said, "just tired." "You sound stressed. Is everything okay?" "Everything's fine, just the usual." We talked for 10 more minutes. She told me about Emma's piano recital coming up, about Lucas's little league game on Saturday. I listened, humming in the right places, feeling like a fraud. When we hung up, I sat in the dark kitchen for a long time. I wasn't ready to blow up my daughter's life. Not yet. But I knew I couldn't let this go. The lake house wasn't just property. It was my husband's voice in every room, my daughter's childhood summers, my grandchildren's inheritance. Mike had tried to erase all of it with one forged signature. I needed proof, real proof, and I knew where to start looking. The next morning I drove to the bank. Not my usual branch. I went to the main office downtown where they kept property records and could pull detailed transaction histories. I'd called ahead, told them I needed to review some documents related to my lake house. The woman on the phone had been polite but vague. "We'll need to verify your identity. Bring your driver's license and social security card." I'd brought everything. Passport too, just in case. The bank manager was a woman about my age, silver hair pulled back in a neat bun. Her nameplate said Janet Morrison. She had me sit in a small office with glass walls, the kind where you can see the whole bank floor, but pretend you have privacy. "Mrs. Henderson, you mentioned the Clearwater Shores property?" "Yes, I received a deed in the mail. It says the property was transferred 6 months ago, but I never authorized any transfer." Janet typed something into her computer, frowned, typed some more. "Let me pull up the full transaction history." While she worked, I watched people at the teller windows, a young mother with a toddler, an elderly man depositing a check. Normal Wednesday morning banking. My life looked normal from the outside, too. Retired teacher, widowed, lived in a nice neighborhood, went to garden club on Thursdays. Nobody would guess I was sitting here investigating whether my son-in-law had committed fraud. "Mrs. Henderson." Janet turned her screen toward me. "The property was transferred on February 14th. The deed shows it was filed with the county recorder on February 15th. The notary stamp is from Patterson and Associates Real Estate." "I was in the hospital that day," I said. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. "Hip replacement surgery. I was sedated." Janet's expression shifted. Not shock. She'd probably seen enough financial irregularities in her career not to be shocked, but concern. Real concern. "The notary stamp is from Mike Patterson's office?" "My son-in-law's old office, before he lost his license." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "Mrs. Henderson, who has access to your accounts?" "Just me. I have a power of attorney that I signed for Mike, but only for bill paying, medical decisions. I was going to be recovering from surgery." "A limited power of attorney." She made a note. "And it didn't include property transfers?" "No, at least I don't think so. I didn't read it as carefully as I should have." Janet pulled up another screen. "The property is currently listed for sale. Has been for 3 months. Asking price is $425,000. The number hit me like a physical blow. $425,000. Mike was going to sell my lake house, take the money and disappear into whatever financial hole he'd dug himself into. "I need copies of everything," I said. "The deed, the transaction records, anything you have." "I can provide those." Janet hesitated. "Mrs. Henderson, you should probably speak with an attorney. This doesn't look right." I took the folder of documents she handed me. My hands didn't shake this time. I was past shock, past disbelief. I was moving into something colder, more focused. "Thank you, Janet, I will." In the parking lot, I sat in my car and called Margaret. She answered on the second ring, slightly breathless. "Barb, everything okay?" "That moving truck you saw at the lake house, when was that exactly?" "Oh." A pause. I could hear her moving, probably going somewhere more private. "Let me think. It was a Saturday." 3 months ago. Maybe 4? I was driving back from the grocery store and saw it in your driveway. Mike was there with another man loading furniture. What kind of furniture? I couldn't see clearly from the road, but there were boxes too. Lots of boxes. I almost stopped to ask if you were downsizing, but Mike saw me and waved, so I thought you must have sent him. He didn't say anything to you? I saw him at the coffee shop the next week. You know that place on Main Street where we meet sometimes? I asked how the move went, and he said you were thinking about assisted living, that you couldn't manage the property anymore. I closed my eyes. I never said that. I know that now. At the time, I thought, well, you'd just had surgery. Maybe you'd decided it was too much. But it felt wrong, Barb. I should have called you. I'm so sorry. It's not your fault. I could hear the guilt in her voice, and I didn't want her carrying that. Mike lied to both of us. What are you going to do? I looked at the folder on my passenger seat. Property records, transaction histories, a paper trail that Mike thought I'd never find. I'm going to stop him. That afternoon, I drove to the lake house. 43 miles of highway I knew by heart. Every exit, every turn. I'd made this drive 1,000 times. Summer weekends, holidays, emergency trips when pipes froze or the roof leaked. My husband used to drive back when he was alive. After he died, I'd learned to make the trip alone. I'd never imagined making it like this, to see what Mike had stolen. The for sale sign stood in the front yard, red and white against the pine trees. Patterson and Associates Real Estate, Mike's old company. They were still using his name even though he didn't work there anymore. I sat in my car at the end of the driveway. I couldn't make myself drive up to the house. Not yet. From here I could see the dock, the porch where I'd drunk my coffee every summer morning, the kitchen window where I'd washed dishes while watching Sarah and her friends swim. A different realtor's car was parked in the driveway. Someone was showing the house. Right now, while I sat here, strangers were walking through my home, imagining their furniture in my rooms, their memories replacing mine. I felt a flicker of sympathy. Margaret had mentioned Mike was facing foreclosure, that his family might lose their home, the gambling, the debts, the desperation. I could understand how a person might make terrible choices when they're cornered, when they're terrified of failing their family. Then I remembered the forged signature, the calculated planning, the lies to Margaret, to Sarah, probably to everyone. This wasn't a moment of desperation. This was premeditated theft. I started the car and backed out of the driveway. I wasn't ready to go inside, wasn't ready to see what Mike had taken, but I was ready to fight to get it back. By the time I got home, I'd made 3 decisions. First, I was going to talk to an attorney. Not just any attorney, but someone who specialized in elder law and financial abuse. Tom, my financial advisor, had mentioned a colleague once. Susan something. I'd get her number. Second, I was going to tell Sarah. No more protecting her from the truth. This was her husband, and she deserved to know what he'd done. Third, I was going to get my lake house back. However long it took, whatever it cost, I wasn't letting Mike steal 40 years of my life. I made an appointment with Tom's attorney friend for Friday morning, Susan Garrett, elder law specialist. Her assistant said she had an opening at 9 a.m. I took it. I had 3 days to gather every document I could find. The original deed, the power of attorney, my medical records from the surgery, bank statements, anything that could prove Mike had forged my signature and exceeded his legal authority. 3 days to build a case that would save my home. I set the county recorder's deed on my kitchen table. That forged signature stared back at me. Mike had been so confident, so sure I'd never notice, never question, never fight back. He'd underestimated me. That was his first mistake. Susan Garrett's office was in a converted Victorian house downtown, the kind with high ceilings and crown molding that made you feel like you were visiting someone's home instead of a law office. Her assistant, a young woman with kind eyes, offered me coffee. I accepted. My hands needed something to hold. Susan came out to meet me herself. Early 50s, sharp gray suit, hair pulled back in a no-nonsense ponytail. She shook my hand firmly. Mrs. Henderson, Tom speaks highly of you. Come on back." Her office had built-in bookshelves lined with legal texts, elder law, estate planning, financial abuse, and fraud. I sat in a leather chair across from her desk and pulled out my folder of documents. "Tom mentioned you're dealing with a property issue," Susan said, settling into her chair with a legal pad. "Yellow, like Tom's. Maybe it was a professional thing. My son-in-law forged my signature to steal my lake house." I'd practiced saying it in the mirror that morning, making it sound factual instead of hysterical. Susan's expression didn't change. She'd probably heard worse. "Walk me through it from the beginning." I told her everything. The envelope from the county recorder, the forged signature, the hospital stay on February 14th, Mike's power of attorney, the property listed for sale at $425,000, Margaret seeing the moving truck, Mike's lies about assisted living. Susan took notes the entire time, precise, organized handwriting filling page after page. When I finished, she set down her pen. "Mrs. Henderson, this is prosecutable fraud. What we're looking at here is forgery, elder financial abuse, and multiple violations of notary law. Your son-in-law could face serious prison time." The words hung in the air between us. Prison time. My daughter's husband. My grandchildren's father. I nodded slowly. "What do I need to do?" "First, let me look at these documents." She pulled on reading glasses and spread everything across her desk. The forged deed. The power of attorney I'd signed. The hospital records I'd requested from the medical center. Bank statements showing the transaction. She studied the deed for a long time, holding it up to the light. "Look at this signature." She pointed to my name. "See these hesitation marks? The way the pen lifted and pressed down multiple times? That's classic traced forgery. Whoever did this was trying to copy your signature, not sign naturally." She pulled out the power of attorney. "Now look at this one. This is your real signature, correct?" "Yes. I signed that in the hospital." "The loops are completely different. The pressure is consistent. This is how you actually sign your name." She set them side by side. Even I could see the difference now. The deed signature looked artificial, practiced, fake. Susan pulled out another document. "These are your hospital records for February 14th. You were admitted at 6 a.m. for hip replacement surgery. You were in the operating room from 8 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. You were in recovery until 3 p.m., then moved to a room where you spent the night. I don't remember much of that day. The medications made everything fuzzy. That's normal, but look at this." She pointed to the deed. "This was notarized at 2:15 p.m. on February 14th at Patterson and Associates Real Estate in downtown. That's 60 miles from the hospital. You were still in recovery, barely conscious. There's no possible way you could have been at that office." The timeline made it so clear, so obvious. Mike hadn't just forged my signature. He'd done it while I was unconscious, unable to defend myself. "The notary," Susan continued. "Do you know this person?" She showed me the stamp. Kevin Morris, commission number listed, expiration date. "No, I've never heard of him." "He worked with Mike at the real estate office. I've already looked him up. He lost his notary commission 6 months ago for a different violation. This deed was notarized 3 months before that, but it's still illegal. A notary must witness the signature in person, must verify the identity of the signer. Kevin Morris never met you, never saw you sign anything. That's a criminal offense." She made more notes. "The power of attorney. Let me read through this." She scanned the document, highlighting sections as she went. "This is a limited power of attorney. It specifically states authority to pay bills, manage medical decisions, and handle routine banking transactions during the grantor's recovery from surgery. That's it. Nothing about real property. Nothing about transferring deeds or selling assets." So Mike didn't have the legal right to transfer the house? Not even close. He exceeded his authority by about a mile. Even if you had signed that deed, which you didn't, he had no legal right to facilitate or execute that transaction. Susan pulled up something on her computer. "I'm looking at the county recorder's database. The deed was filed February 15th. The listing went live with Patterson and Associates on March 1st. 2 weeks later, she turned her screen toward me. There's your house. I saw the photos. My lake house, my porch, my dock. Strangers would scroll through these images, imagining their furniture in my rooms. How fast can you stop the sale? I asked. We file an emergency injunction today. I'll have it on a judge's desk by 3 p.m. The sale will be halted immediately pending investigation. And then? Then we build a criminal case. I'll refer this to the district attorney's office. They'll want to talk to you, examine the evidence. We'll also need a forensic handwriting analyst to testify that the signature is forged. How long will all this take? Susan leaned back in her chair. Weeks, maybe months. It depends on how fast the DA moves, whether Mike contests anything, if there are plea negotiations. Are you prepared for that? I thought about my grandchildren, about Emma asking if the lake house would always be in our family, about Lucas catching his first fish off that dock, about 40 years of summer mornings with coffee on the porch swing. Yes, I said, I'm prepared. That afternoon, Susan called in a favor from a colleague, Dr. Patricia Wong, forensic handwriting analyst with 20 years of experience. She agreed to examine the documents as an expert witness if we needed her for trial. Susan also contacted the district attorney's office. She knew someone in the elder abuse division. They take these cases seriously, she told me over the phone. Financial exploitation of seniors is a priority. By 4 p.m., the emergency injunction was granted. The sale of my lake house was officially halted. Susan emailed me a copy of the court order. I printed it and held it in my hands. Legal proof that someone was listening. Someone believed me. Tom called that evening. Susan told me about the case. I'm so sorry, Barb. I should have caught this during our quarterly review. You couldn't have known. I didn't even know. I went through your accounts today, did a full analysis of the last 2 years. Mike didn't just take the house. He's been accessing your accounts through that power of attorney, small withdrawals, 200 here, 500 there. Never enough to trigger alerts, but it adds up. My stomach dropped. How much? $12,000 over 18 months. That investment opportunity last year, the one where I gave Mike $12,000. He hadn't lost it. He'd already taken it. The cash I gave him was just additional theft. I'm flagging everything, Tom said. New passwords, 2-factor authentication, alerts on any transaction over $50, and I'm revoking that power of attorney effective immediately. Thank you, Tom. We're going to fix this. Susan's the best. If anyone can get your house back, it's her. After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table with the injunction order in front of me. Mike would be served with papers tomorrow. He'd know that I knew, that I was fighting back. Part of me wanted to call Sarah, warn her before the legal system dropped this bomb on her family, but Susan had advised against it. Let the papers speak first, she'd said. Don't give him time to prepare a defense or hide evidence. I looked at the photo on my refrigerator. Mike and Lucas with their fishing poles. That had been real, hadn't it? That day, that moment, Mike had genuinely loved my grandson, had been patient and kind and present. How do you reconcile that person with the person who forged my signature, who stole my home while I was unconscious? Maybe you don't. Maybe people are capable of both kindness and cruelty. Maybe Mike loved his family and was still willing to destroy mine to save his. Susan looked at me across her desk. This is prosecutable fraud, she said. I nodded slowly. My son-in-law wasn't just a thief, he was a criminal, and I was about to turn him in. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the forged signature, how Mike must have practiced it, tracing my handwriting over and over until he felt confident enough to put it on a legal document. The planning involved, the calculation. This wasn't a desperate mistake. This was premeditated theft. I got up at 2 a.m., made chamomile tea, stood at the kitchen window. Margaret's porch light was on 3 houses down. She stayed up late these days. Insomnia, she'd said. Too much time to think. I knew that feeling. My phone buzzed, a text from Sarah. Mom, are you awake? My heart jumped. Did she already know? Had Mike told her? Yes, can't sleep. Me either. Can I call? I almost said no. Almost told her I was tired, we'd talk tomorrow. But I hit the call button instead. Mom. Her voice was tight, stressed. Is everything okay? You seemed off when we talked the other day. I'm fine, honey, just the usual, knee acting up. The lie felt terrible. Mike's been weird lately, stressed. He won't tell me what's wrong, but I know something's going on. Did he say anything to you? No. Why would he? I don't know, She trailed off. Never mind, I'm probably imagining things. Sarah, I should let you sleep. Love you, Mom. Love you too. She hung up before I could say anything else. I stood there with my phone in my hand, my tea going cold on the counter. Tomorrow, Mike would be served. Tomorrow, everything would explode, and Sarah would be caught in the middle, trying to understand how her husband could do this to her mother. I should have told her right then, should have warned her, but I didn't. Susan had said to let the papers speak first, and maybe there was some cowardice in that too, letting the legal system be the bad guy instead of me. I went back to bed but didn't sleep. Just lay there in the dark thinking about Mike practicing my signature, about Sarah's worried voice on the phone, about my grandchildren who were about to learn that their father was a criminal. By morning, I was exhausted, but I was also ready. The papers would be served at noon, and everything would change. The call came at 10:30 a.m., Susan. The injunction's been served. Mike received the papers 20 minutes ago at his home. Sarah was there. My stomach dropped. How do you know? The process server noted it in his report. Both parties present. Mike signed for receipt. So Sarah knew now, had probably read every page while Mike tried to explain, tried to spin it, tried to make it sound like a misunderstanding. What happens next? I asked. We wait. Mike has 72 hours to respond through an attorney. My guess is he'll lawyer up fast. This isn't going away. After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table staring at my phone, waiting for Sarah to call, waiting for her to demand answers, to defend Mike, to ask me how I could do this to her family. The call came at 11:15. Mom. Her voice was shaking, not crying yet, but close. What's going on? There's a sheriff at our door. Papers about the lake house. They're saying Mike forged your signature? I took a breath. Yes. Mom, that can't be right. There has to be a mistake. There's no mistake, Sarah. Mike transferred the lake house into his name while I was in the hospital. He forged my signature on a deed. He's been trying to sell it for 3 months. Silence. Then, you're serious? I have the documents, hospital records that prove I was sedated when the deed was supposedly signed, handwriting analysis showing the signature is forged, a notary who never met me but stamped it anyway. Why didn't you tell me? Her voice cracked. Why did I have to find out from a sheriff serving papers? My attorney advised me not to. I'm sorry, I wanted to tell you, but... But what? You thought I was in on it? You thought I knew? No, Sarah, no. I knew you didn't know. But I needed legal protection first. I needed to stop the sale before Mike could... Stop calling him Mike like he's some stranger. She was crying now. He's my husband, the father of my children, and you're accusing him of being a criminal. I closed my eyes. Sarah, I'm not accusing. The evidence is clear. He forged my signature. That's a fact. He said it's a misunderstanding, that you agreed to transfer the house for tax reasons and now you're confused. I'm not confused. My voice came out harder than I intended, firm. I never agreed to anything. Mike stole my house while I was unconscious. He's been planning to sell it and keep the money. $425,000, Sarah. That's what he was going to walk away with. We're losing our house. Her voice dropped to a whisper. We're 3 months behind on the mortgage. Mike's been trying everything to save us. Maybe he made a mistake, but he was trying to help. By stealing from me? It's not stealing if it's family. You were going to leave us the lake house anyway, right? In your will? So what's the difference? The difference is 40 years. I stood up, pacing my kitchen. The difference is he forged a legal document. The difference is he lied to you, to me, to everyone. Sarah, he told your neighbor I was going into assisted living. He told people I couldn't manage the property anymore. He made me sound incompetent so no one would question him. Silence. I could hear her breathing, processing. Sarah, I love you. I love Emma and Lucas, but Mike committed fraud, and I can't let it go just because he's your husband. You're going to destroy my family. She was crying hard now. The kids are asking why there's a sheriff here. How am I supposed to explain this to them? I don't know, honey, but they need to know the truth eventually. The truth is their grandfather who loves them, stole from their grandmother. That's the truth you want me to tell them? I heard Mike in the background, his voice rising, angry. Sarah said something I couldn't make out. I have to go, she said. Mike's attorney is coming over. We need to figure this out. Sarah. She hung up. I stood there with my phone in my hand, my heart pounding. That hadn't gone well. But what had I expected? That she'd immediately take my side against her husband? That she'd believe me over him without a fight? I'd known this would tear her family apart. I just hoped she'd understand why I had to do it. That afternoon, I drove to the lake house. 43 miles felt longer today. Every mile felt like I was driving towards something I couldn't take back. Susan had arranged for a locksmith to meet me there at 2 p.m. We were changing every lock. Mike wasn't getting back inside my house. The for sale sign still stood in the front yard, red and white against the pine trees. Patterson and Associates Real Estate. Mike's name in small print at the bottom, even though he hadn't worked there in 2 years. I pulled up the driveway. The locksmith's van was already there. Mrs. Henderson. Young guy, early 30s, tool belt hanging from his waist. I'm ready whenever you are. The sign came out easier than I expected. The metal stake slid from the dirt with one hard pull. I carried it to the locksmith's van, set it in the back. He didn't ask questions, just nodded and started on the front door. I walked through the house while he worked. Every room held memories. The kitchen where I'd made pancakes for Sarah every summer Saturday. The bedroom where my husband died in his sleep, peaceful, 5 years ago this October. The porch where Emma had learned to read, curled up in the wicker chair with chapter books. Mike had tried to sell all of this, had walked through these rooms with a realtor, pointing out features, discussing market value, erasing us. The locksmith finished in 45 minutes. All new keys, deadbolts on front and back. You're secure. I paid him, watched him drive away. Then I walked down to the dock. The water was calm, late afternoon sun turning everything gold. This dock. My husband had proposed here, 45 years ago. We'd been dating for 2 years. I was teaching elementary, school. He was finishing his residency. We'd driven up for the weekend and he'd gotten down on one knee right where I was standing now. Sarah had gotten married here too, 8 years ago. Small ceremony, just family. Mike in a gray suit, nervous and sweet. Sarah in a simple white dress. They'd said their vows with the water behind them, and I'd cried because my daughter looked so happy. How do you hold both of those memories at once? The sweetness and the betrayal? I sat down on the dock, let my feet dangle over the edge. The wood was warm from the sun. I thought about Mike practicing my signature, sitting at some desk, tracing my name over and over until he could forge it well enough to fool a notary. The time that took, the planning. He'd looked Sarah in the eye every day while stealing from me, had held Emma and Lucas, read them bedtime stories, helped with homework, all while plotting to take their inheritance. And maybe he told himself it was okay. Maybe he convinced himself he was saving his family, that I'd never notice, that it wasn't really stealing because it would have been theirs eventually anyway, but it was stealing. And I noticed. I sat on the porch swing that night, watching the sun set over the water. pink and orange bleeding into dark blue. 40 years of sunsets from this porch. My husband beside me for most of them, then alone for the last 5. 40 years of memories in these walls. My husband's voice in every room, Sarah's childhood laughter, Emma's first steps on this porch, Lucas catching fireflies in the yard. Mike tried to erase all of it with one signature, but I was still here, and the lake house was still mine. New keys sat heavy in my pocket, silver and brass, unmarked mine. The old ones were somewhere in Mike's possession, useless now. He couldn't get back in, couldn't take anything more. For the first time since opening that envelope from the county recorder, I felt something shift. Not quite victory, not relief, just solid ground, like I'd stopped falling and found my feet again. Mike had tried to steal my home, but I'd taken it back. Susan called as I was locking up to leave. Mike hired Richard Stokes, aggressive defense attorney, former prosecutor. He plays hardball. What does that mean for us? It means Mike's not going down without a fight. Richard's already filed a motion to dismiss the injunction. Claims you gave verbal consent for the transfer and are now suffering from age-related confusion. I'm 68, not senile. I know, and we'll prove it. But it's going to get ugly, Barb. They're going to attack your credibility, your memory, your mental state. That's how Richard works. Let them try. There's something else. Richard's requested a deposition. 2 weeks from today. Mike will testify under oath. We'll present evidence, call witnesses. It's like a mini trial before the real one. And if he lies, then we prove he's lying. We have the hospital records, the forensic handwriting, analysis, the notary who's cooperating with us. Mike can spin whatever story he wants, but the evidence doesn't lie. I looked back at the lake house, my house, secured now, protected. 2 weeks, I said. I'll be ready. I know you will. I drove home in the dark, 43 miles of highway with my headlights cutting through the night. The new keys jangled in my pocket every time I moved, a reminder, a promise. The lake house was mine. The sale was stopped. Mike's lies were about to be exposed in a legal deposition where he couldn't hide. I'd spent 68 years avoiding conflict, being the peacemaker, the one who smoothed things over, who forgave too easily, who chose family harmony over truth. But you can only be pushed so far before something breaks, or maybe before something finally stands up. Mike had pushed me too far, and now he was going to face the consequences. Mike's attorney moved fast. 3 days after the injunction, Richard Stokes filed a motion to dismiss, claiming I'd given verbal consent for the transfer and was now experiencing age-related confusion and memory issues. Susan called me that afternoon. It's a standard defense strategy. Attack your credibility, make you look incompetent. Don't take it personally. They're calling me senile. They're calling you confused, which we'll disprove with medical records, witness testimony, and the fact that you've been handling your own finances perfectly well for 5 years since your husband died. Richard's throwing everything at the wall to see what sticks. What about the deposition? Still scheduled, 2 weeks from yesterday. But Richard's also proposed something else. She paused. A settlement. I sat down at my kitchen table. What kind of settlement? Mike returns the property to you. Deed transfer reversed. House goes back in your name. In exchange, you drop all criminal charges and civil claims. No fraud prosecution, no trial, no public record. It all goes away. Mike walks free. Yes. I looked at the photo on my refrigerator. Emma and Lucas at the lake last summer. Innocent faces, unaware their father was a criminal. What do you think I should do? I asked. That's not my call, Barb, but I'll tell you what the options look like. If you accept, you get your house back immediately. No trial, no depositions, no dragging this through the courts for months. Your daughter's marriage might survive. Your grandchildren don't have to watch their father go to prison. And if I don't accept? Then we go to deposition. We prove fraud. The DA prosecutes. Mike faces prison time, probably 18 months to 3 years. You get your house back anyway, but it takes longer and costs everyone more, financially and emotionally. He forged my signature, Susan. He stole my house while I was unconscious in a hospital bed. I know. If I let him walk away, what does that teach Emma and Lucas? That you can steal from family and face no consequences? I can't answer that for you. I stood up, paced to the window. Margaret's porch light was on 3 houses down. Tuesday evening. She'd be making dinner. Probably that pot roast she loved. Normal life. My life hadn't been normal in 2 weeks. How long do I have to decide? Richard wants an answer by Friday, 3 days. Tell him no. Barb, tell him no. Mike committed fraud. He should face the consequences. I'm not dropping the charges. Susan was quiet for a moment. Okay, I'll let Richard know. But be prepared. He's going to fight harder now. And this is going to get uglier before it gets better. Let it get ugly. I'm not backing down. The letter arrived the next morning. Plain white envelope, my name and address handwritten. No return address, but I recognized Mike's handwriting immediately. I almost threw it away unopened. Almost. Instead, I made coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and opened it. Mom, he'd always called me that. I know I messed up. The gambling got out of control after I lost my license. I kept thinking the next bet would fix everything, that I could pay you back before you noticed. I thought if I sold the lake house, I could save our home, keep my family together. I never meant to hurt you. Sarah doesn't know about the gambling. Nobody does. I've been hiding it for 2 years, digging myself deeper every time I tried to climb out. I see what I did now. I forged your signature. I stole your house. I lied to everyone. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just needed you to know I'm sorry. I'm getting help now. Real help this time, not just promises. I joined Gamblers Anonymous last week. I'm talking to a therapist. I know it doesn't fix what I did, but I'm trying to be better. For Sarah. For the kids. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry. I read it 3 times, looking for manipulation, looking for lies, trying to find the angle, the play, the strategy Richard Stokes had coached him to write. All I found was a desperate man who destroyed his life and tried to take mine with him. The gambling. I hadn't known. Sarah hadn't mentioned it, but maybe she didn't know either. 2 years of hidden addiction, debts piling up, Mike digging deeper with every bet, convinced the next one would fix everything. I understood desperation. I understood the panic of watching everything fall apart. I'd felt it myself 2 weeks ago when I opened that envelope from the county recorder. But understanding didn't mean forgiving, and it certainly didn't mean letting him walk away without consequences. I put the letter in my desk drawer. It didn't change anything, but I couldn't throw it away either. 2 days later, Mike's mother called. Patricia. We'd never been close. She'd made it clear from the beginning that Sarah wasn't good enough for her son. Divorced, 2 kids from a previous marriage, teaching salary instead of something more prestigious. I'd bitten my tongue at every holiday dinner, every birthday party, every family gathering where Patricia made subtle digs about Sarah's choices. Now she wanted my sympathy. Barbara, I know Mike made a mistake, she started. Her voice had that careful tone people use when they're trying not to sound desperate. But he's a father. Those children need him. Emma and Lucas, they're already asking why they can't see him, why there are lawyers and court papers. Can't you find it in your heart to forgive him, for the children's sake? I stood at my kitchen window, phone pressed to my ear. He forged my signature, Patricia. He tried to steal my home. It was a misunderstanding. It was fraud. You're going to destroy his life over one mistake. He has a family, Barbara. A wife who loves him. Children who need their father. You're a grandmother yourself. Surely you understand. I understand that Mike committed a crime and that he needs to face the consequences. He could go to prison. Do you want Emma and Lucas to grow up without a father? Do you want Sarah to be a single mother again? Have you thought about what this will do to them? I had thought about it. Every night. Every time I closed my eyes. "Have you thought about what Mike did to me?" I asked quietly. "I'm 68 years old. I saved for 40 years to buy that property. My husband and I built a life there, and Mike tried to take it all, while I was unconscious, while I trusted him to take care of me. He was desperate. So was I when I found out, but I didn't steal from anyone." Patricia's voice hardened. "You're being vindictive. This isn't about justice. This is about revenge. This is about teaching my grandchildren that actions have consequences, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. You're tearing this family apart." "No, Patricia. Mike did that when he forged my signature." She was crying now. "Please, he's my son. I'm begging you. Drop the charges. Let this go. I'll make sure he pays you back." "This isn't about money." "Then what is it about?" I looked at the lake house keys on my counter. New keys. Mine. "It's about standing up for myself, even when everyone tells me not to." "You're going to regret this." Her voice turned cold. "When Sarah divorces him, when those children ask why you sent their father to prison, you're going to regret it." "Maybe, but I'll regret letting him get away with it more." I hung up. My hands were shaking, not from fear, from anger. Patricia had raised Mike, had taught him his values, had probably excused his behavior his entire life, and now she wanted me to do the same. I called Margaret. She answered on the second ring. "Barb, you okay?" "Mike's mother just called, tried to guilt me into dropping the charges." "Oh, honey." She said I'm tearing the family apart, that Emma and Lucas will hate me, that I'm being vindictive. "You're not vindictive. You're protecting yourself." She kept saying it was just one mistake, that I should forgive him because he's desperate. Being desperate doesn't give you permission to steal. I took a breath. Let it out. I needed to hear that. How many times do I need to say it? You're doing the right thing. Mike broke the law. He needs to face consequences. End of story. What if Sarah never forgives me? Then that's on Sarah, not you. You didn't create this situation. Mike did. We talked for 20 more minutes about the deposition coming up, about Susan's strategy, about how I was sleeping, barely, and eating when I remembered. Margaret brought over pot roast that evening, set the Pyrex dish on my counter, and hugged me without saying anything else. Some things don't need words. The night before the deposition, I couldn't sleep. I stood in my kitchen at 2 a.m., chamomile tea cooling on the counter, staring out at the dark street. In 10 hours, I'd be sitting across from Mike in a conference room. He'd testify. He'd lie, probably. Richard Stokes would coach him, tell him exactly what to say, how to look sympathetic and confused instead of guilty. And then Susan would present the evidence, the hospital records, the forensic handwriting analysis, the notary who never met me, the premeditation email Susan had discovered during subpoena, Mike planning the sale 8 months ago, long before my surgery, proving this wasn't desperation but calculation. One by one, we'd dismantle his lies, and Mike would have to sit there and watch his story fall apart. Part of me felt sick about it. He was still Emma and Lucas's father, still the man who'd taught Lucas to fish, who'd helped Emma with her piano practice, still Sarah's husband, but he was also the man who'd forged my signature, who'd stolen my house, who'd lied to everyone, to me, to Sarah, to Margaret, to the realtor, to the notary. He'd gambled away his integrity long before he gambled away his money. I thought about Patricia's words. "You're going to regret this." Maybe I would. Maybe in 5 years, sitting alone at Thanksgiving while Sarah celebrated with Mike's side of the family, I'd regret it. But I wouldn't regret standing up for myself, wouldn't regret saying no to being stolen from, wouldn't regret teaching Emma and Lucas that even grandmothers deserve to be treated with respect. I went back to bed but didn't sleep, just lay there in the dark thinking about tomorrow, the deposition, the evidence, The moment Mike's lies would be exposed, and the moment my daughter would have to choose between believing her mother or defending her husband. I didn't know which way Sarah would choose, but I knew which way I had to go. Forward. The deposition was scheduled for 9 a.m. at Richard Stokes' law office downtown. Modern building, glass and steel, the kind that makes you feel small when you walk through the lobby. Susan met me in the parking garage. Ready? I wasn't, but I nodded anyway. The conference room was all polished wood and leather chairs. A court reporter sat in the corner, fingers poised over her stenography machine. Mike was already there with Richard Stokes. Expensive suit, silver hair, the kind of confidence that comes from winning. Mike looked terrible. Thinner than I remembered. Dark circles under his eyes. He couldn't look at me. Susan and I sat across the table. The court reporter swore everyone in. Hands raised. Truth, whole truth, nothing but. Mike's hand shook slightly as he raised it. Richard started. Mr. Patterson, can you describe your relationship with Mrs. Henderson? Mike cleared his throat. She's my mother-in-law. We've been family for 8 years, since I married her daughter, Sarah. And would you say you have a good relationship with Mrs. Henderson? Yes, I've always respected her, cared about her. She's been generous to our family over the years. I watched him, the way he sat forward slightly, making eye contact with Richard, coached, every word practiced. Let's talk about the Clearwater Shores property, Richard continued. The lake house. Can you tell us about the transfer that occurred in February? My mother-in-law was going into surgery, hip replacement. She was worried about estate taxes, about the house being tied up in probate if something happened to her. She asked me to handle the transfer so Sarah would have the property without complications. First lie. Smooth, confident. Susan made a note on her legal pad. Did Mrs. Henderson sign the deed transferring the property? Richard asked. Yes. I brought the paperwork to her house before the surgery. She signed it at her kitchen table. I witnessed it. Second lie, delivered with the same calm certainty. And the notarization. I took the signed deed to my office, had it notarized there, standard procedure. Was Mrs. Henderson present at the notarization? No, but she'd already signed. The notary was just witnessing my signature as the person who'd witnessed hers. That wasn't how notarization worked, but Richard didn't correct him. Mr. Patterson, has Mrs. Henderson ever expressed confusion or memory issues in your presence? Mike hesitated, just slightly. She's been more forgetful lately, since my father-in-law died 5 years ago. Sometimes she'll tell us the same story twice. Forget what we talked about last week. Small things, but noticeable. Third lie. And this one made my face hot. Susan leaned forward. My turn. Richard nodded. Susan pulled out a document. Mr. Patterson, these are hospital records from February 14th. Can you confirm this is the date you claim Mrs. Henderson signed the deed? Yes. And this shows Mrs. Henderson was admitted to Memorial Hospital at 6 a.m. for hip replacement surgery. She was in the operating room from 8 a.m. to 11:30 a.m., in recovery until 3 p.m., heavily sedated, then moved to a room for overnight observation. Is that correct? Mike's jaw tightened. I don't know the exact times. But you claim she signed the deed at her kitchen table before surgery? Yes, the night before. Probably. I don't remember exactly. The deed is dated February 14th, not the 13th. That might be when I filed it, not when she signed it. The notary stamp also shows February 14th, 2:15 p.m. at Patterson and Associates Real Estate, 60 miles from Memorial Hospital. Like I said, I took it to be notarized after she signed while she was in recovery, still sedated. You're testifying under oath that Mrs. Henderson signed this deed the night before surgery, but the date on the deed and the notarization both show February 14th, 2:15 p.m., when hospital records prove she was unconscious. Mike looked at Richard. Richard put a hand on his arm. My client has answered the question. Susan set down the hospital records, pulled out another document. This is the power of attorney Mrs. Henderson signed, also in February, correct? Yes. Can you read the scope of authority section? Mike took the document. His hands weren't steady. The agent is authorized to pay bills, manage medical decisions, and handle routine banking transactions during the grantor's recovery from surgery. Does it mention real property? Property transfers? Real estate transactions? No, but did Mrs. Henderson ever give you verbal permission to transfer the Clearwater Shores property? She expressed concerns about estate planning. That's not what I asked. Did she explicitly tell you to transfer the lake house into your name? Silence. Mr. Patterson, it was implied. Implied. So your testimony is that Mrs. Henderson, who'd owned this property for 40 years, who held it as a significant family asset, who never mentioned selling or transferring it to anyone, somehow implied that you should forge her signature and steal it. Objection. Richard stood. Counsel is testifying. I'm clarifying Mr. Patterson's testimony. Susan didn't look away from Mike. Did Mrs. Henderson ever explicitly authorize you to transfer the property? Yes or no? No, not in those exact words. Thank you. Susan called the first witness, Kevin Morris, the notary. He was younger than I expected, early 30s, nervous, fidgeting with his watch. He avoided looking at Mike. Susan swore him in. Mr. Morris, you worked with Mike Patterson at Patterson and Associates Real Estate? Yes, for 3 years, until the office closed in 2023. And you were a commissioned notary public during that time? Yes. Did you notarize a property deed on February 14th, transferring the Clearwater Shores property from Barbara Henderson to Mike Patterson? Kevin swallowed hard. Yes. Was Mrs. Henderson present when you notarized this deed? No. Did you meet Mrs. Henderson at any time? Verify her identity? Witness her signature? No. Mr. Morris, you're aware that notary law requires you to witness the signature in person, correct? To verify the identity of the person signing? Yes. So you violated notary law when you stamped this deed? Yes. His voice was barely audible. Why did you do it? Kevin looked at Mike, then away. Mike was my boss. He'd given me a job when I needed one. He asked me to notarize a deed, said his mother-in-law had already signed it, but she was recovering from surgery and couldn't come in. He said it was just a formality, that we were helping her with estate planning. Did you believe him? I wanted to. Mike was a good boss, a good guy as far as I knew, but I knew it was wrong. I knew I wasn't supposed to stamp a document I hadn't witnessed. Why did you do it anyway? Kevin's eyes filled. Because Mike was desperate. He kept talking about losing his house, his family needing him. He said if I didn't help, everything would fall apart. I felt bad for him, so I stamped it. And I've regretted it every day since. Are you cooperating with law enforcement now? Yes. I lost my notary commission 6 months later for a different violation. When I heard about this case, I contacted the district attorney's office. I wanted to make it right. Susan nodded. Thank you, Mr. Morris. Richard cross-examined, tried to make Kevin seem unreliable, motivated by revenge. But the damage was done. Kevin had admitted the notarization was illegal, and he'd testified that Mike had pressured him to do it. Susan called the second witness, Dr. Patricia Wong, 50, precise gray suit and reading glasses. She carried a briefcase full of documents. Susan swore her in. Dr. Wong, can you describe your qualifications? I'm a forensic document examiner with 22 years of experience. I specialize in handwriting analysis, signature authentication, and forgery detection. I've testified as an expert witness in over 200 cases. Have you examined the property deed in question, the one allegedly signed by Mrs. Henderson on February 14th? Yes, I conducted a comprehensive analysis comparing the deed signature to known exemplars of Mrs. Henderson's signature, the power of attorney, bank documents, medical records. What did you conclude? Dr. Wong opened her briefcase, pulled out enlarged photographs of signatures, set them on the table where everyone could see. This is the deed signature. She pointed to the first image. Note the hesitation marks here, here, and here. The pen lifted and pressed down multiple times, particularly in the loops of the B and the H. The pressure is inconsistent. The angle varies. These are classic indicators of traced forgery. She set down another image. This is Mrs. Henderson's authentic signature from the power of attorney, signed 2 days earlier. The loops are fluid. The pressure is consistent throughout. The angle is natural. This is someone signing their own name. The difference was stark. Even I could see it now, enlarged like this. The deed signature looked artificial, practiced, fake. Now look at the letter formation. Dr. Wong used a pointer. Mrs. Henderson's authentic signature has a distinctive way of connecting the R to the B in Barbara. It flows naturally, one continuous motion. The deed signature has a break here. The forger tried to copy the connection, but lifted the pen, breaking the flow. She set down more images, detailed close-ups, microscopic analysis. In my professional opinion, to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty, the signature on the deed is a traced forgery. It was not executed by Barbara Henderson. Someone attempted to copy her signature, but the hesitation marks, pressure inconsistencies, and letter formation errors are conclusive evidence of fraud. Richard tried to challenge her methodology, tried to suggest the differences could be explained by Mrs. Henderson's age, her medication, her recovery from surgery. Dr. Wong didn't budge. I've analyzed thousands of signatures from elderly individuals, including those under the influence of post-surgical medications. This is not a natural variation. This is deliberate forgery. Susan turned to Mike. Mr. Patterson, you've heard the testimony. Kevin Morris admits he illegally notarized a deed he didn't witness. Dr. Wong has testified that the signature is forged. Hospital records prove Mrs. Henderson was unconscious when you claim she signed. Do you still maintain that Mrs. Henderson authorized this transfer? Mike looked at Richard. Richard leaned in, whispered something. Mike shook his head. I need a break. We're almost done, Mr. Patterson. Just answer the question. His voice cracked. I made a mistake. What kind of mistake? I thought I could fix everything. We were losing the house. Sarah didn't know how bad it was. I'd been hiding the debts, the gambling, all of it. I thought if I could sell the lake house, I could pay everything off and nobody would have to know. So you forged Mrs. Henderson's signature. Silence. Mr. Patterson? I practiced her signature, from old birthday cards, letters. I practiced until I could make it look close enough. Then I took it to Kevin, told him she'd already signed, that we were just helping her with estate planning. The room was completely quiet. Even the court reporter had stopped moving. Did Mrs. Henderson ever give you permission to do this? No. Did you tell your wife what you were doing? No. Did you plan this before Mrs. Henderson's surgery? Mike closed his eyes. Yes, I'd been planning it for months. I knew she'd be vulnerable, that I had the power of attorney, that I could make it look legitimate. I thought she wouldn't notice until it was too late, or that she'd just let it go, because we're family. Richard put a hand on Mike's shoulder. That's enough. We need to discuss a plea arrangement. Susan sat back. We're done here. When Mike finally admitted it, I didn't feel triumphant, just tired and sad. This was my daughter's husband, my grandchildren's father, and he was a criminal. I looked at him across the table. He was crying now, quietly. Not the desperate tears of someone trying to manipulate, just the hollow tears of someone who destroyed everything and finally had to face it. He'd gambled away his integrity long before he gambled away his money, and now he had nothing left. I stood up. Susan gathered her papers. We were leaving when Richard stopped us in the hallway. My client would like to enter a plea, guilty to forgery and elder financial abuse, in exchange for a reduced sentence. Susan looked at me. I nodded. We'll discuss it with the DA, but Mrs. Henderson gets her property back immediately, full restitution for legal fees, and Mike stays away from her. Agreed. Outside the conference room, Sarah was waiting, sitting on a bench in the hallway, her face pale. I heard everything, she said quietly. The door was open. I heard Mike admit it. I sat down beside her, didn't say anything, just sat there. I didn't know about the gambling, she said. 2 years. He hid it for 2 years. I had no idea how bad our finances were. I thought we were just tight. I didn't know we were about to lose the house. Sarah, I'm sorry, Mom. I said terrible things to you. I defended him. I thought you were being vindictive. But you were right. You were right about everything. She was crying now. Hard, gut-wrenching sobs. I put my arm around her. I know, honey. He's the father of my children, and he's a criminal. I know. What am I supposed to tell Emma and Lucas? The truth, that their father made terrible mistakes, that actions have consequences, that you love them and will get through this together. She leaned against me, my daughter, 42 years old, and she felt like she was 10 again, needing her mother to tell her everything would be okay. I didn't know if everything would be okay, but we'd survive. We always did. The plea deal came through 3 weeks later. Mike pleaded guilty to 1 count of forgery and 1 count of elder financial abuse. The judge sentenced him to 18 months in county jail, followed by 3 years of probation. He'd also pay restitution, $50,000 to cover my legal fees and emotional damages. The amount was symbolic more than anything. Mike didn't have $50,000, but the court ordered it anyway. Susan called with the news. It's over, Barb. The criminal case is closed. Mike's already been processed into custody. He'll be eligible for work release after 6 months if he maintains good behavior. And the house? The deed has been reversed. The property is officially back in your name. I've filed the corrected deed with the county recorder. You should receive confirmation within a week. I hung up and looked at the lake house keys on my kitchen counter. They'd been sitting there for a month, waiting. Now they meant something again, mine, legally, finally. Sarah filed for separation the day Mike was sentenced, not divorce, not yet. She needed time to process, she said, time to figure out what she wanted for herself and the kids. We met for coffee 2 days after the sentencing, a small place downtown, neutral territory. She looked exhausted, thinner, dark circles under her eyes that even makeup couldn't hide. How are Emma and Lucas? I asked. Confused, angry. Emma keeps asking why Daddy did something so bad. Lucas just wants him to come home. I don't know how to explain it to them in a way that makes sense. You tell them the truth, that their father made terrible choices, that sometimes people we love disappoint us, but that it doesn't mean we stop loving them. It just means we have to protect ourselves. Sarah stirred her coffee. I hired a therapist, for all of us. Family sessions. The kids need help processing this. So do I. That's good. That's really good, honey. I'm selling the house, she said quietly. Our house, the one Mike was trying to save. I can't afford the mortgage alone, and I can't live there anymore. Too many memories of him lying to me, pretending everything was fine while we were drowning. Where will you go? I don't know yet. Something smaller, maybe an apartment. Just something the kids and I can manage. I reached across the table, took her hand. You can stay at the lake house, as long as you need. There's plenty of room, and the kids love it there. She looked up, tears in her eyes. Mom, I can't. Yes, you can. It's your inheritance anyway. Consider this an early start. You and Emma and Lucas, summer at the lake, fresh air, fresh start. What about Mike's family? Sarah asked. His mother calls every day, tells me I'm abandoning him, that I'm supposed to stand by my husband in sickness and in health. Mike committed fraud, Sarah. This isn't sickness, this is crime. I know. but it still feels like I'm failing somehow, like a good wife would forgive him, would wait for him, would help him rebuild. A good wife protects herself and her children. You're doing the right thing. She cried then. Hard, exhausted tears, the kind that come from weeks of holding everything together and finally letting it break. I held her hand and waited. Mike's family stopped speaking to me entirely. Patricia left one final voicemail, her voice cold and clipped. I hope you're satisfied, Barbara. You've destroyed my son's life. I hope you can live with yourself. I deleted it without responding. Mike's brother called once, asking if I'd write a letter to the parole board supporting early release. I said no. He called me heartless. I hung up. I didn't feel heartless. I felt protective of myself, of Sarah, of Emma and Lucas. Mike had made his choices. Now he was living with the consequences, and I wasn't going to rescue him from them. The grandchildren took it harder than I expected. Emma stopped talking to me for 2 weeks. Sarah said she was processing, that she blamed me for taking her father away. Lucas just seemed sad, quiet. He asked me once if I still loved them. Of course I do, I told him. Always. Then why did you send Daddy to jail? I didn't send him, sweetheart. He sent himself. When you do something against the law, there are consequences, even for grown-ups, even for people we love. But you could have forgiven him. Forgiving someone doesn't mean letting them hurt you. I can forgive your dad and still protect myself. Those two things can be true at the same time. He thought about that. Okay. It wasn't okay. Not really. But it was a start. Emma came around eventually. One afternoon at the lake house, she sat beside me on the dock. Didn't say anything for a long time. Then, Mom says Daddy has a gambling problem, that he's been lying to everyone. That's true. I'm mad at him, and I'm mad at you. But mostly I'm just sad. Me too, honey, me too. Will you still be here? After everything? Always. I'm your grandmother. Nothing changes that. She leaned against me. We sat like that for an hour, watching the water. I restructured my estate plan 6 months after the trial. Susan referred me to a trust attorney. Together, we established an irrevocable trust for Emma and Lucas. The lake house would go into the trust when I died. Sarah would be the trustee, but she couldn't sell it or transfer it. It would belong to the grandchildren, their inheritance, protected. The trust included specific provisions. If Sarah remarried, her new spouse would have no claim to the property. If either grandchild tried to sell before age 30, the proceeds would go into a managed fund they couldn't access until they demonstrated financial responsibility. You're protecting them from making Mike's mistakes, the trust attorney said. I'm protecting them from ever being in Mike's position, so they never feel desperate enough to steal. We also set up college funds, educational trusts that couldn't be touched for anything else. Emma and Lucas would have options, choices. They wouldn't be trapped by debt or desperation. The lake house would stand for generations, a place where they could bring their own families someday, where they could remember their grandmother and know she fought to protect them. Margaret threw a small gathering at her house 3 months after the trial. A celebration of survival, she called it. Just a handful of women from Garden Club. Cake, coffee, conversation about everything except Mike. She pulled me aside in her kitchen while refilling the coffee pot. How are you really doing? Tired, relieved, still processing. Patricia's been telling people you're vindictive, that you railroaded Mike out of spite. I know, I don't care anymore. Good, because you did the right thing. And everyone who matters knows it. She hugged me. Her roses were blooming outside the kitchen window, yellow, red, white, beautiful and fierce. I started volunteering, she said, at the senior center. They have this program about financial fraud prevention, teaching older adults how to spot scams, protect their assets. I thought, maybe my experience with watching Mike could help someone else. That's wonderful, Margaret. You inspired me. Watching you fight back, most people would have just given up. Let him have the house to keep the peace. But you didn't. You stood up for yourself. That matters. Tom restructured my entire financial portfolio after the trial. New accounts, new passwords, two-factor authentication on everything, fraud alerts, identity monitoring. I should have caught this earlier, he said during our quarterly review. Should have noticed the small withdrawals Mike was making. You couldn't have known. I should have asked harder questions, pushed back when you signed that power of attorney without reading it carefully. Tom, you're my financial advisor, not my babysitter. I made my own choices. Some of them were bad choices, but I learned. He smiled slightly. You did more than learn. You fought back. Most of my elderly clients, when they're victims of financial fraud, they just accept it. Too embarrassed to report it. Too scared of family conflict. You reported it. You prosecuted. You protected yourself and your grandchildren. That takes courage. Or stubbornness. Same thing sometimes. Susan sent a final bill 6 months after the trial. Legal fees totaled $18,000. Mike's restitution order covered most of it, though I doubted I'd ever see that money. I paid Susan in full anyway. She'd earned every penny. She called when she received my check. Barb, you didn't have to pay the full amount. We could have worked out a payment plan. You saved my home. You exposed a criminal. You protected my family. That's worth more than $18,000. I'm glad we could help, and I'm glad you're okay. Me too. 1 year after the trial, I stood on the lake house dock with my morning coffee. The water was calm. Early, sun painting the surface gold. Sarah and the kids were inside, still sleeping. They'd been staying at the lake for the summer. Emma was learning to kayak. Lucas had caught 3 bass in the last week. The new keys sat heavy in my pocket, a reminder of what I'd almost lost, what I'd fought to keep. I thought about Mike. He'd be eligible for parole in 6 more months. I wondered if Sarah would take him back, wondered if Emma and Lucas would forgive him, wondered if he'd actually learned anything from this nightmare. But mostly, I thought about myself. The woman who'd signed a power of attorney without reading it, who'd trusted too easily, who'd avoided conflict to keep peace, she was gone, or at least changed. I wasn't afraid of conflict anymore, wasn't afraid to stand up for myself, wasn't afraid to protect what was mine. The lake house stood behind me, 40 years of memories, my husband's voice still echoing in the walls, Sarah's childhood summers, Emma and Lucas's futures. Mike had tried to erase all of it, but I was still here, and the house was still mine. That was enough. 2 years after the trial, I woke up in the lake house bedroom to sun streaming through the curtains. Saturday morning, no alarm, just the sound of water lapping against the dock and Emma's voice drifting up from the kitchen. Grandma, you want pancakes? Please, honey. I got dressed, went downstairs. Emma was at the stove flipping pancakes with the confidence of a 12-year-old who'd spent 2 summers learning her grandmother's recipes. Lucas sat at the table, working through a math worksheet, tongue between his teeth in concentration. Sarah came in from the porch, coffee cup in hand. Morning, Mom. Morning. She looked better than she had in 2 years, lighter. The divorce had finalized 6 months ago. She'd moved into a small house in town, something she could afford on her teaching salary. The kids spent summers here at the lake with me. Weekends, too, when school was in session. Mike was out on parole. He'd served 12 months, got early release for good behavior. He saw Emma and Lucas every other weekend now, supervised visits at first, then on his own once the parole officer approved it. Sarah said he was working at a warehouse, living in a sober living facility, attending Gamblers Anonymous meetings 3 times a week. I didn't ask for details. That part of the story wasn't mine anymore. Emma set a plate of pancakes in front of me. Mom says you're updating your will again. Estate planning, making sure everything's protected. For us, Lucas said, not looking up from his math. For you, for your mom, for whoever comes after you. That's morbid, Grandma, Emma said, but she was smiling. That's practical. You'll understand when you're older. Sarah caught my eye across the table, mouthed, "Thank you." I nodded. The trust was working exactly as designed. The lake house secure, the college funds growing. Emma was already talking about universities, biology, maybe marine science. Lucas wanted to be a veterinarian. They had options, choices. They wouldn't be trapped by debt or desperation. They wouldn't become Mike. After breakfast, I walked down to the dock with my second cup of coffee. The water was calm. Early September light, golden and soft. Margaret had called yesterday, checking in like she did every week. She'd become the coordinator for the Senior Center's Financial Fraud Prevention Program. They'd helped 17 people in the last year, mostly elder abuse cases, family members stealing from aging parents or grandparents. "You started something," Margaret had said. "People heard your story. They're not staying quiet anymore." Tom had restructured 3 other clients' estates after my case, implementing the same protections we'd put in place for me. Fraud monitoring, limited powers of attorney with expiration dates, irrevocable trusts. He'd even given a presentation at the local library about financial safety for seniors. Susan still sent me Christmas cards, professional courtesy that felt like friendship. I'd survived. More than survived. I'd protected myself. Protected my family, protected my home, and I'd learned something crucial. Being kind doesn't mean being weak. Being generous doesn't mean being a doormat. Loving your family doesn't mean letting them steal from you. I thought about the woman I was 3 years ago, the one who signed documents without reading them, who trusted too easily, who avoided conflict to keep peace. She would have let Mike take the house, would have convinced herself it was fine. That family comes first, that causing trouble wasn't worth it. But family doesn't justify theft. Love doesn't excuse fraud. And keeping the peace isn't worth losing yourself. I'd fought back, filed charges, gone to trial, watched my son-in-law admit to forgery in a conference room while my daughter sat outside crying. It had been the hardest thing I'd ever done, and I'd do it again. Not because I'm vindictive, not because I wanted revenge, but because standing up for yourself matters, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard, especially when the person stealing from you is family. Emma came down to the dock, sat beside me. "You okay, Grandma?" Just thinking. About Daddy? About everything. About how we got here. About what comes next. She picked at a piece of splintered wood on the dock. "I'm still mad at him sometimes, for lying, for hurting you, for messing everything up." That's allowed. "But I miss him too. Does that make me a bad person?" "No, honey, that makes you human. You can be mad at someone and still love them. Those things can exist together." "Is that how you feel about him?" I thought about it. Really thought about it. "I don't know if I love him anymore. But I don't hate him either. I hope he gets better. For your sake and Lucas's. But I don't trust him. And I won't ever give him power over me again." "Mom says you're the strongest person she knows." "Your mom is being generous." "No, she means it. She said you taught her that it's okay to protect yourself, that you don't have to stay in situations that hurt you just because leaving is hard." I put my arm around Emma, pulled her close. "Your mom is pretty strong herself." "Yeah, she is." We sat there for a while watching the water. The lake house stood behind us, 42 years of memories. My husband's voice in the walls, Sarah's childhood, Emma and Lucas's futures. Mike had tried to take all of it, but we were still here, and we always would be. That evening, after Sarah and the kids left, I sat on the porch swing with chamomile tea and watched the sunset, pink and orange bleeding into dark blue. The same sunset I'd watched for 42 years. The same sunset I'd watched for however many years I had left. The new keys sat on the side table, silver and brass, unmarked, mine. I thought about everyone who might be listening to this story. Everyone who's trusted the wrong person. Everyone who's been stolen from by family. Everyone who's wondering if standing up for themselves is worth the cost. It is. It's worth it. Not because justice always feels good. Sometimes it feels terrible. Sometimes you'll sit alone in your kitchen at 2 a.m., wondering if you did the right thing, wondering if protecting yourself was worth losing your daughter's marriage, worth your grandchildren's tears, worth the family fracture that might never fully heal. But you did the right thing, because you deserve to be protected. You deserve to keep what's yours. You deserve to set boundaries, even with family, especially with family. If someone forges your signature, that's not a mistake. That's a crime. If someone steals from you while you're vulnerable, that's not desperation. That's predation. And you don't owe anyone forgiveness just because they're family. Stand up for yourself. File charges if you need to. Protect your assets. Don't sign documents without reading them. Don't give anyone power of attorney without strict limits and expiration dates. And if someone violates your trust, don't stay silent to keep the peace. Peace without justice isn't peace. It's just surrender. I finished my tea, stood up, locked the lake house door with those new keys. Tomorrow I'd drive back to my house in town, back to garden club on Thursday, back to my routine. But I'd come back here next weekend, and the weekend after, and every summer with Emma and Lucas, because this house was mine. Hard-won, protected, safe, and I was still here to enjoy it. That was more than enough. That was everything.